What was your audience? I mean, judging by the wordplay that you use in your nickname, you were aiming to address Bulgarian audiences. Was there a market for your work in Bulgaria, or were you mainly selling your books over internet to other countries?
Well, actually, the marketplace in Bulgaria was at the time completely non-existent. It's very weak right now as well. I've been doing lots of things to try to pique a bit of interest in handmade books and in books as a craft item, a collector's item, and so on, but it's been a very slow process. And it's a bit paradoxical that even when at one point when I wanted to get my master's, how should I say, document that I'm a master craftsman in this, to actually legally practice my work, there was the paradox that there was nobody to examine me. There was no bookbinders in the capital working as independent craftsmen. So it was a very slow process to actually arrange this committee. And right now in the capital, I'm the only craftsman bookbinder with a document. So if anybody else wants to become a bookbinder, I'm actually the only one qualified to make his examination, which is a bit of a strange situation because I'm really not that proficient. Not really a name that has been around for years. I'm fairly young, so it sounds a bit unfair to me to have this
responsibility.
But, yeah, but it's just the situation around here.
Actually, I was really surprised when Stopan told me that he had found a Bulgarian bookbinder. I've never heard of a Bulgarian bookbinder or a Bulgarian book artist, because what you do is actually art, at least to me. And the situation is not new. Now, my grandfather spent most of his life in Bulgaria, and it was a long life. He was born in 1920, and he told me that the last time he could find a good bookbinder in Bulgaria was in 1930s. So most of our library, our family's library, was rebound abroad, like in France or in Germany. And I'm really glad to hear that things are changing slowly. Are you thinking perhaps of taking pupils or?
Well, yes and no. Basically, it's I'm still not sure what exactly am I supposed to be teaching people, because I'm really, how should I say, it's not like I'm a commission-based bindery where I work specifically on fine bindings or library bindings or something like this that can be methodically identical and therefore somehow taught to students. I'm currently trying to make very exotic work, and I'm not sure how exactly should I teach this type of bookmaking, except maybe in some kind of small technique-based workshops, for example, only leather pairing or leather tooling or sewing methods and something like that. And the most recent thing I'm going to try is there is a village here in the north part of Bulgaria that has been very active in trying to make it tourist destination for book-based events. So basically, they've been getting a lot of funding. There's a non-governmental organization that has been driving all this stuff. And in short, they have libraries, they have book events, readings, and really want to incorporate bookbinding in this project. And so they've been inviting me to somehow develop a course for their project. So this will probably be the first teaching experience, a bit more large scale that I'll be making. So it's probably going to be later this year or early in the next one. And,
That sounds really interesting. What do you mean a village? How come a village can afford a project like that? Is it something like a traditional craft village like Ether in Gabrovo?
No, it's as I understand it, it's inspired by there is this international cooperative which includes cities and villages that are famous in some way for their kind of I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble to find the right words, but let's just say that these particular cities or villages are famous for their development of some kind of book culture, be it in preservation, be it as a past writing center or something like that. So this village actually is, from last year, is part of this international organization of such book cities and villages, and wants to develop its specific regional culture in this direction, I guess. I'm not sure if they had this sort of culture in the past. I'm not sure if there were any writing, for example, medieval writing centers there or binding centers there, but I guess they want to make it a contemporary contribution in some way.
You mentioned your father, and I understand that you were exposed to arts and crafts from early childhood as he's a silversmith. Am I right?
Yeah.
And is it that, do you have some tradition of craftsmanship running through your family, or your father was the first to take this path?
He was the first. He actually comes from a family of doctors. And it was a bit incidental because he got into silversmithing out of just sheer luck. He was right here in the capital when he was young, around 20 years ago, just as the transition from communism to primitive democracy came around here. So jobs were a bit scarce, and a friend found him in a bar and told him, "Can you help me out in this silversmithing workshop?" And he said, "Okay, whatever pays, really." So he went there, and they were making just regular copies of things, really, because after communism, a lot of people were hungry for crosses and Virgin Marys, and they were making a lot of these. So he really didn't develop, how should I say, a creative side in this job, but technique-wise, he learned a lot. And for 20 years later, he did nothing of the sort. He worked a completely different job.
Yeah.
And when I started to develop this bookbinding and ask him to somehow relearn what he knew and supply himself with some tools, he was just in a month he remembered everything he done 20 years ago and just emerged this absolute creativity from him that I've never seen before. It's been really interesting because it allowed me to know my father in a way which I really didn't know before, and we're a great team because we really don't have to speak much to each other. I only have to say to him 2 words, and he knows exactly what to do, and I always like what he thinks of.
That's beautiful, and he does some amazing work, and what that people can see on your bindings, and on his. He has a separate social network account, so social Instagram account or something, as far as I remember. And yeah, that's an impressive work.
And it's a very traditional thing to work as a father-son team. I have a friend who's a woodcarver, and he works with his father, and he's been working with him all his life. And I saw them working. They barely speak to each other in the process. They only need to look at each other, and they know what to do. It's a very rare thing nowadays. I envy you, actually.
Well, it was a strange process to begin, but right now, really, it's very fulfilling. Although a bit stressful as any creative work, because you don't have a salary. But yeah, you know how it is.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to ask you a bit more on the traditional side of your work. I understand you want to continue some Bulgarian, maybe not Bulgarian, Balkanian traditions of bookbinding. At least you talked about that in your interview for iBookBinding Instagram.
Interview with Anna Markova. It was initially published on a different Instagram, and we just agreed with Anna that we will share it. So yeah, props to Anna for making this interview.
A tip to Anna, yeah. So what are Bulgarian traditions? Because from what I understand, they were interrupted for centuries and centuries. So you're basically reconstructing something that hadn't been a living tradition for a while. What are Bulgarian traditions in bookbinding and bookcraft for you?
Well, there's not really much. As I've mentioned in this particular interview, in my opinion, the last time we actually had some kind of contribution to this craft was in medieval times, still when this was bookmaking was for manuscripts exclusively, before the rise of printing presses. And this contribution still wasn't much. It was basically more or less in terms of decoration, structural. In terms of structure, it was more or less Byzantine tradition in all aspects. I mean, they're basically identical as I've seen them. So it's not really much, and I've tried in the past to kind of build upon it, but really I realized at some point that it's just not really possible. So I've been trying to consider it as a sort of puzzle, how it could have developed until now. So I've been really studying methods from different cultures. I'm really influenced by English bookbinding from the 19th and 20th century. I can't really shed that from my work right now. And in decorative terms, I've been trying to combine these pieces of what decorative traditions were around this time prevalent in pottery, in stone masonry, in wood carving, and embroidery, and really trying to connect a sort of stylistic atmosphere that I can translate somehow into the book to make it look like from it's around here, although not really in direct connection to how books were made 300, 400 years ago. So this is my particular experiment in creating some sort of a style or tradition that has roots in Bulgaria in particular, although I'm not sure how successful I am in this.
I guess we'll see in 20 years or something.
Yeah, yeah.